Chapters 5 and 6 of Book 5 of Les Misérables.
Volume 3 by Victor Hugo. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Robert Kuiper. Les Misérables, Volume 3 by Victor Hugo. Translated by Isabel, Florence, HAPGOOD. Book Number 5, The Excellence of Misfortune. Chapter 5, Poverty, a Good Neighbor for Misery. Marius liked this candid old man who saw himself gradually falling into the clutches of indigence, and who came to feel astonishment, little by little, without, however, being made melancholy by it. Marius met Courfeyrac and sought out Monsieur Mabeuf, very rarely, however, twice a month at most. Marius' pleasure consisted in taking long walks alone on the outer boulevards, or in the Champs de Mars, or in the least frequented alleys of the Luxembourg. He often spent half a day in gazing at a market garden, the beds of lettuce, the chickens on the dung heap, the horse turning the water wheel. The passers-by stared at him in surprise, and some of them thought his attire suspicious and his mien sinister. He was only a poor young man, dreaming in an objectless way. It was during one of his strolls that he hit upon the Gorbeau house, and tempted by its isolation and its cheapness, had taken up his abode there. He was known there only under the name of Monsieur Marius. Some of his father's old generals or old comrades had invited him to go and see them when they learned about him. Marius had not refused their invitations. They afforded opportunities of talking about his father. Thus he went from time to time to Comte Pajol, to General Bellavesne, to General Fririon, to the Invalides. There was music and dancing there. On such evenings Marius put on his new coat. But he never went to these evening parties or balls, except on days when it was freezing cold, because he could not afford a carriage, and he did not wish to arrive with boots otherwise than like mirrors. He said sometimes, but without bitterness, men are so made that in a drawing-room you may be soiled everywhere except on your shoes. In order to ensure a good reception there, only one irreproachable thing is asked of you. Your conscience? No. Your boots. All passions, except those of the heart, are dissipated by reverie. Marius' political fevers vanished thus. The Revolution of 1830 assisted in the process by satisfying and calming him. He remained the same, setting aside his fits of wrath. He still held the same opinions, only they had been tempered. To speak accurately, he had no longer any opinions, he had sympathies. To what party did he belong? To the party of humanity. Out of humanity he chose France. Out of the nation he chose the people. Out of the people he chose the woman. It was to that point above all that his pity was directed. Now he preferred an idea to a deed, a poet to a hero. And he admired a book like Job more than an event like Marengo. And then, when, after a day spent in meditation, he returned in the evening through the boulevards, and caught a glimpse through the branches of the trees of the fathomless space beyond, the nameless gleams, the abyss, the shadow, the mystery, all that which is only human seemed very pretty indeed to him. He thought that he had, and he really had in fact, arrived at the truth of life and of human philosophy, and he had ended by gazing at nothing but heaven, the only thing which truth can perceive from the bottom of her well. This did not prevent him from multiplying his plans, his combinations, his scaffoldings, his projects for the future. In this state of reverie, an eye which could have cast a glance into Marius' interior would have been dazzled with the purity of that soul. In fact, had it been given to our eyes of the flesh to gaze into the consciousnesses of others, we should be able to judge a man much more surely according to what he dreams than according to what he thinks. There is will in thought, there is none in dreams. Reverie, which is utterly spontaneous, takes and keeps, even in the gigantic and the ideal, the form of our spirit. Nothing proceeds more directly and more sincerely from the very depths of our soul than our unpremeditated and boundless aspirations toward the splendors of destiny. In these aspirations, much more than in deliberate, rational, coordinated ideas, is the real character of a man to be found. Our chimeras are the things which the most resemble us. Each one of us dreams of the unknown and the impossible in accordance with his nature. Towards the middle of this year 1831, the old woman who waited on Marius told him that his neighbors, the wretched Jondrette family, had been turned out of doors. Marius, who passed nearly the whole of his days out of the house, hardly knew that he had any neighbors. "Why are they turned out?" he asked. "Because they do not pay their rent. They owe for 2 quarters." "How much is it?" 20 francs, said the old woman. Marius had 30 francs saved up in a drawer. "Here," he said to the old woman, "take these 25 francs, pay for the poor people, and give them 5 francs, and do not tell them that it was I." Chapter 6. The Substitute. It chanced that the regiment to which Lieutenant Théodule belonged came to perform garrison duty in Paris. This inspired Aunt Gillenormand with a second idea. She had, on the first occasion, hit upon the plan of having Marius spied upon by Théodule. Now she plotted to have Théodule take Marius' place. At all events, and in case the grandfather should feel the vague need of a young face in the house, these rays of dawn are sometimes sweet to ruin, it was expedient to find another Marius. "Take it as a simple erratum," she thought, "such as one sees in books. For Marius, read Théodule." A grandnephew is almost the same as a grandson. In default of a lawyer, one takes a lancer. One morning, when M. Gillenormand was about to read something in the Quotidienne, his daughter entered and said to him in her sweetest voice, for the question concerned her favorite, "Father, Théodule is coming to present his respects to you this morning." "Who's Théodule?" "Your grandnephew." "Ah!" said the grandfather. Then he went back to his reading, thought no more of his grandnephew, who was merely some Théodule or other, and soon flew into a rage, which almost always happened when he read. The sheet which he held, although royalist of course, announced for the following day, without any softening phrases, one of these little events which were of daily occurrence at that date in Paris, that the students of the schools of law and medicine were to assemble on the Place du Panthéon at midday to deliberate. The discussion concerned one of the questions of the moment, the artillery of the National Guard, and a conflict between the Minister of War and the citizens' militia. "On the subject of the cannon parked in the courtyard of the Louvre. The students were to deliberate over this." It did not take much more than this to swell M. Gillenormand's rage. He thought of Marius, who was a student, and who would probably go with the rest to deliberate at midday on the Place du Panthéon. As he was indulging in this painful dream, Lieutenant Théodule entered clad in plain clothes, as a bourgeois, which was clever of him, and was discreetly introduced by Mademoiselle Gillenormand. The lancer had reasoned as follows: "The old druid has not sunk all his money in a life pension. It is well to disguise oneself as a civilian from time to time." Mademoiselle Gillenormand said aloud to her father, "Théodule, your grandnephew," and in a low voice to the lieutenant, "approve of everything and she withdrew. The lieutenant, who was but little accustomed to such venerable encounters, stammered with some timidity, "Good day, uncle," and made a salute composed of the involuntary and mechanical outline of the military salute, finished off as a bourgeois salute. "Ah, so it's you. That's well. Sit down," said the old gentleman. That said, he totally forgot the lancer. Théodule seated himself, and M. Gillenormand rose. M. Gillenormand began to pace back and forth, his hands in his pockets, talking aloud and twitching with his irritated old fingers at the two watches which he wore in his two fobs. "That pack of brats! They convene on the Place du Panthéon. My life! Urchins who were with their nurses but yesterday. If one were to squeeze their noses, milk would burst out. And they deliberate tomorrow at midday. What are we coming to? What are we coming to? It is clear that we're making for the abyss. That is what descamisados have brought us to deliberate on the citizen artillery, to go and jabber in the open air over the gibes of the National Guard. And with whom are they to meet there? Just see whether Jacobinism leads. I will bet anything you like, 1,000,000 against a counter, that there will be no one there but returned convicts and released galley slaves, and the Republicans and the galley slaves. They form but one nose and one handkerchief. Carnot used to say, 'Where would you have me go, traitor?' Foch replied, 'Wherever you please, imbecile.' That's what the Republicans look." "That is true," said Théodule. M. Gillenormand half turned his head, saw Théodule, and went on. "When one reflects that scoundrel was so vile as to turn carbonaro. Why did you leave my house to go and become a Republican? In the first place, the people want none of your republic. They have common sense. They know well that there always have been kings and that there always will be. They know well that the people are only the people, after all. They make sport of it, of your republic. Do you understand, idiot? Is it not a horrible caprice? To fall in love with Père Duchesne, to make sheep's eyes at the guillotine, to sing romances and play on the guitar under the balcony of 93. It's enough to make one spit on all these young fellows, such fools are they. They are all alike, not one escapes. It suffices for them to breathe the air which blows through the streets to lose their senses. The 19th century is poison. The first scamp that happens along let his beard grow like a goat's, thinks himself a real scoundrel, and abandons his old relatives. He's a Republican, he's a romantic. What does that mean, romantic? Do me the favor to tell me what it is. All possible follies. A year ago they ran to Hernani. Now, just to ask you, Hernani antithesis, abominations, which are not even written in French. And then they have cannons in the courtyard of the Louvre. Well, such are the rascalities of the age.
"You are right, uncle," said Théodule. M. Gillenormand resumed.
"Cannons in the courtyard of the museum. Now, for what purpose? Do you want to fire grape shot at the Apollo Belvedere? What are those cartridges to do with the Venus de Medici? Oh, the young men of the present day are they're all blackguards. What a pretty creature is their Benjamin Constant. And those who are not rascals are simpletons. Yes, they do all they can to make themselves ugly. They're badly dressed. They are afraid of women. In the presence of petticoats, they have a mendicant air which sets the girls into fits of laughter. On my word of honor, one would say the poor creatures are ashamed of love. They are deformed, and they complete themselves by being stupid. They repeat the puns of Tiercelin and Potier. They have sack coats, stablemen's waistcoats, shirts of coarse linen, trousers of coarse cloth, boots of coarse leather, and their rigmarole resembles their plumage. One might make use of their jargon to put new soles on their old shoes. And all this awkward batch of brats has political opinions, if you please. Political opinions should be strictly forbidden. They fabricate systems, they recast society, they demolish the monarchy, they fling all laws to the earth. They put the attic in the cellar's place, and my porter in the place of the king. They turn Europe topsy-turvy. They reconstruct the world, and all their love affairs consist in staring slyly at the ankles of the laundresses as these women climb into their carts. Oh, Marius, you blackguard, to go and vociferate on a public place, to discuss, to debate, to take measures. They call that measures. Just God! Disorder humbles itself and becomes silly. I have seen chaos. Now I see a mess. Students deliberating on the National Guard. Such a thing could not be seen among the Ojibways nor the Cadadoches. Savages who go naked with their noodles dressed like a shuttlecock, with a club in their paws, are less of brutes than those bachelors of arts, four-penny monkeys. And they set up for judges. Those creatures deliberate and rationate. The end of the world has come. This is plainly the end of this miserable terraqueous globe. The final hiccup was required, and France has omitted it. Deliberate, my rascals. Such things will happen so long as they go and read the newspapers under the arcades of the Odeon. That cost them a sou, and their good sense, and their intelligence, and their heart, and their soul, and their wits. They emerge thence and decamp from their families. All newspapers are pests, all, even the Drapeau Blanc. At bottom, Martinville was a Jacobin. Just heaven, you may boast of having driven your grandfather to despair. That you may.
That is evident, said Théodule.
And profiting by the fact that M. Gillenormand was taking breath, the lancer added in a magisterial manner,
there should be no other newspaper than the Moniteur, and no other book than the Annuaire Militaire. M. Gillenormand continued,
it is like their Sieyès, a regicide ending in a senator, for that is the way they always end. They give themselves a scar with the address of thou as citizens, in order to get themselves called eventually Monsieur le Comte. Monsieur le Comte as big as my arm, assassins of September. The philosopher Sieyès, I will do myself the justice to say that I have never had any better opinion of the philosophies of all those philosophers than of the spectacles of the grimacer of Tivoli. One day I saw the senators cross the Quai Malplaquet in mantles of violet velvet sewn with bees, with hats à la Henri IV. They were hideous. One would have pronounced them monkeys from the tiger's court. Citizens, I declare to you that your progress is madness, that your humanity is a dream, that your revolution is a crime, that your republic is a monster, that your young and virgin France comes from the brothel, and I maintain it against all, whoever you may be, whether journalists, economists, legists, or even were you better judges of liberty, of equality, and fraternity than the knife of the guillotine. And that I announce to you, my fine fellows.
Parbleu, cried the lieutenant, that is wonderfully true. M. Gillenormand paused in a gesture which he had begun, wheeled round, stared Lancer Théodule intently in the eyes, and said to him, you are a fool. End of chapters 5 and 6. 6.